In lesson 20, we are going to take a look at transformations, transversals, and proof. And so we're going to be making some statements about parallel lines. So we're going to be on page 143 in your student workbook. Okay, so page 143. And we're first just going to take a look. We have two lines on there, L and M, that are parallel to each other. So let's just think about what the measure of X is in each figure. This is a math talk, so go ahead and talk to your groups about what the measurements are in each of those four in your student workbook, and then I will talk through them as well. So you can pause and come back. So taking a look at this first one, maybe you see that this translates down. Okay, so if we translated this set down, because we've got parallel lines, so translate it down and the 40 would land on the X. So 40 and the X are the same. So X is 40. For this one, maybe you notice rotating this 180 degrees. Okay, so rotating this top set 180 would land the 61. Okay, right on top of the X. So the X is also going to be 61 degrees. This one, okay, when you rotate this set of angles down, okay, this one ends up where? Okay, so where's this one going to end up when we rotate this down? Is going to actually end up here, next to the X. So then together these two make 180, so this one has to be 82 degrees to make that straight line. So X is 82 in that one. And then this one, again, if we rotate, so you could rotate or you could translate. If you want to translate this one down, it's going to be here. And then you could look at it being vertical angles and remembering that vertical angles are equal. So that one's going to be 125. Might be another one you think about here. So when you translate these angles down, if you translate down, the 98 ends up here. So then again, you see this straight line to make that 180. So if instead of rotating, you were kind of looking at translating. All right, then on page, on the next page, so page 143, let's take a look here. So for this one, we're going to be looking at step one is going to be to translate line AE. Okay, so here's line AE and line CD by this directed segment B. Okay, so by this directed segment B, that's what we're going to translate on. So you're going to take these two lines, so you can do tracing paper, and you're going to move them this far. So you're going to grab B and move it to C. Okay, so that's how far you're going to move that line. Okay, so you're just going to move these, translate from B to C, and take that whole tracing paper and slide it down. And then relabel your new points. So you've got A is going to be moved to there, E is going to be moved, so you'll have A prime, B is moving to here, so that'll be B prime, D is moving, E is moving. So your new set of lines should look like this. So A moved to A prime, B moved to B prime, C moved to C prime, E moved to E prime. So then we're going to take a look in our groups at finding kind of the translated angles. Where do you see the angles and their congruent angles? So where did they move to? Okay, so which angles are congruent? So as you're doing this, angle what? So identify the angle. Like if we're going to start ABD, okay, so if I wanted to look at angle ABD, I would say angle ABD is congruent to, and then I would say A prime, B prime, D prime. Why? So my justification is because it's the image of ABD. Okay, and when we're doing rigid transformation, so translation is a rigid transformation, so it preserves the size. So in your group, come up with more, and as you are saying them, so one person will say one set, the rest of the group either agrees or disagrees, and then discuss it. So you can pause the video until you've had time to do that. All right, so the first angle that I had said, I'm just going to get that written down here. So I had said angle ABD was congruent to angle A prime, B prime, D prime because of it's the image. So we had this ABD, A prime, B prime, D prime. So the next one up here, maybe you did DBE. So angle DBE. So DBE congruent to D prime, B prime, E prime. Again, same justification. So if I look at this bottom angle here, so this one, so that's angle ABC from my original lines given to me. So that's going to translate to A prime, B prime, C prime. So A prime, B prime, C prime be the same as that. Again, same justification here. And then maybe EBC is congruent to angle E prime, B prime, C prime. Okay, so they're all images of the original. And you may have come up with some others. That's okay. We're going to discuss some of those other ones in a bit here. So just taking a look so far, we noticed this angle here to this one. That's where that one translated to. We noticed this angle to this angle to this one, and this angle to this one. Okay, so that's kind of the things that we saw so far in here. So now let's take a look at, instead of translating the line, let's think about it as rotating the line. So rotating the blue line 180 degrees will land it right on top of this green line. So at the top of page 144, let's actually do that. So let's actually do a 180 degree rotation. So get your tracing paper. Could be the same tracing paper because it's the same diagram as before. So now you're going to take your tracing paper and you're going to rotate these 180 degrees. So I'm just going to get these drawn on here. And then you're going to rotate it 180 degrees around point C. So make sure you put your pencil at C and then rotate this around 180 degrees. So I can't stick down C, so I'm just going to keep rotating it and moving it back to C, but keep your pencil stuck at C and rotate it 180 degrees. Should end up looking like that. So pause the video if you need more time to rotate. And then be sure to label your image and your images on there. So CC prime stayed the same. Okay, B is here for B prime, A prime is here, E prime, and D prime. All right, so make sure your picture at the top of page 144 is labeled like this. And then we're going to look for congruent angles again. Okay, so first of all, what's true about these lines? So now we just rotated this line, so AE and then A prime, E prime. So what's true about these lines? So these two lines are parallel. And how do we know? And we know because a 180-degree rotation takes a line parallel to itself. Okay, so we end up with the image is parallel to the original. So we're going to do the same thing that we did on the last one and come up with congruent angles. So which angle is congruent to which one and why? So go through here and see if you can find those angles agreeing or disagreeing with your group. Okay, so if we start with angle A prime B, or sorry, A, B, D, not prime. So angle A, B, D is congruent to, so A prime, B prime, D prime, right? Because that's the image. So A prime, B prime, D prime, because it's the image. So when I'm identifying these here, here's A, B, D, here's A prime, B prime, D prime. So I'm saying those two are congruent to one another. So if I take a look at this one, DBE, so angle DBE, if I look for the image angle D prime, B prime, E prime right here, that's going to be congruent. Okay, because D prime, B prime, E prime is the image. And we know rigid transformations keep the angles the same size. So similarly, ABC is going to be congruent to angle A prime, B prime, C prime, its image. So A prime, B prime, C prime, so right here. And then finally, this angle, CBE, so CBE is going to be congruent to C prime, B prime, E prime. Okay, so you can kind of see we ended up with the same four angles, but just kind of different positions here. So now we've got this kind of outer angle to this one. And this outer one to this outer one. And then these inner angles. Okay, so now it's rotating them around. So what these are called, so these kind of two different things that we did when we did a translation, okay, so when you translate the top parallel line, okay, so when you translate this set of angles down to the next one. So if I grab this and move down, the angle that it lands on, these are called corresponding. So as you just translate the line down, you get corresponding angles. So this one to here, this angle to this one, corresponding. This one, translate it down to this one, corresponding. This one to this one, corresponding. So when you pick the angles up and move them down, they land on their corresponding angle. Alternate interior is when you rotate the line around. Okay, so when you rotate it around the one it lands on. So kind of alternate means on the opposite side of this transversal. Okay, so this line right here is called a transversal. And we've got those two parallel lines that we saw. So we've got our parallel lines and we've got this transversal. So alternate means on opposite sides of the transversal. Okay, so different sides of the transversal. Interior is between the two parallel lines. So on the inside, so you kind of see how this is in between. So on the inside of these two lines, opposite sides of the transversal. So if I drew another set of these, okay, here's your parallel lines, here's a transversal. This angle here and this angle here are alternate interior. Okay, so would be these ones. This is alternate interior with this. So we've got alternate interior here and here. Corresponding, again, let me draw another set of these. Would just be in a similar position. So I like to think of it as like upper right. So looking at this set of angles here and this set. So these would be corresponding. These would be corresponding. Lower left would be corresponding. Lower right would be corresponding. Okay, alternate interior again. Inside the two lines, opposite sides of the transversal. So this one and this one, or this one and this one, alternate interior. Okay, so then when we're talking about these, so in this summary, so a lot of words here again, but there's different ways to explain that things are true. We went through a few of those different ways. So looking at translations, okay, versus rotations. But when we get these two angles, okay, so we kind of get two angles formed when we have a parallel line. We have this one and we have this one. And why do we say two? Because these are vertical. So this one is going to be the same as this one. This angle measure is going to be the same as this angle measure. And now when we think about translating these or moving them down to this next set, these corresponding angles, so this one corresponds to here, this one corresponds to here, this one corresponds to here, and this one corresponds to here. So it's going to only be two angles. These are all going to move down. All these red ones are congruent. All these blue ones are congruent. So we really only have two angle measures when we have parallel lines. So if I actually put some measurements to these. So if I said this one right here is 40 degrees, then this one's going to be 40 degrees, its vertical angle. This one is going to be 40 degrees, its corresponding angle. And this one. So you've got the vertical and the corresponding. Then a straight line makes 180. So this one is going to be 140. So is its vertical angle. So is its corresponding angle and its vertical angle. I did another set. So let's say that this angle right here is 80 degrees. Then so is its vertical, so is its corresponding, and that one's vertical. Straight line would be 180, so this one's going to be 100. Its vertical is going to be 100. Its corresponding is going to be 100. And its vertical is going to be 100. So you end up with only two different angles, okay, when you have parallel lines. So you've got these alternate interior that we talked about being congruent and the corresponding. So hopefully you can prove that alternate interior angles are congruent. That was that rotation. Okay, so when we took and rotated, so we rotated this down, rotated, and also corresponding angles being congruent. So when you translated and you moved this set down, this landed on its corresponding angle. And then this would be your cool down. So showing EBI is and BCJ are corresponding angles. So showing using a transformation that EBI that takes EBI to BCJ. So just naming a translation that will move it. And then you have your practice problems to do in your workbook, and those start on page 146. So practice problems are on page 146 to page 150.